It's for my own benefit. So you guys ready to party?
Yeah!
Alright, so hopefully you guys had a great day so far here at SPTechCon. My name is Dr. Raymond Tsai. Now I want to set things straight and be clear and make sure we don't mistake one person from another. I'm not that guy. Alright? I'm a better guy. And hopefully you'll agree with me once we're done. So, very excited this afternoon. So I'm going to talk about very exciting, near and dear to our heart topic, requirements. Alright? But I'll guarantee you the next hour, what I'll commit to you is I won't sell you a load of baloney academic, ooh, you gotta do this and that, the other. No, I'm gonna give you proven, effective techniques that in my organization, we've used in the last 10 years as we've been working with SharePoint and helping customers gain success from utilizing this wonderful platform. My name is Dr. Raymond Tsai. For those I haven't met, welcome. Feel free to call me Dux. And yes, that's my real name. So throw all the Dux jokes at me. I got my ducks in a row. Okay. Sorry for those I met yesterday. I'm going to repeat some jokes here. Now, what I want to do to get started is ask the fundamental question, and you got to be honest with me or else I won't proceed with my presentation. Is SharePoint nothing but a big file dump in your organization? Yeah, all right. Yeah. My second question, what's the perception of SharePoint, at least with the general population of your business? Do they hate SharePoint? They call it SharePoint, right? You get users saying SharePoint sucks. Yes? All right, here's an assignment for you. When you get back to work on, I don't know, Thursday or Friday or next Monday, here's what you should tell them. If they tell you SharePoint sucks, you look at them straight in the eye and say, SharePoint doesn't suck, you suck. It's a freaking tool. For crying out loud. You know, the problem with SharePoint has nothing to do with SharePoint. It's people. And the problem with people, and I'm not talking about users, I'm talking about people collectively. You, me, our users, management. A bunch of folks at Microsoft? No, nobody works at Microsoft. Right? So what I want to do is really dissect this issue of why some people think SharePoint sucks, but more importantly, how do we shape relevant solutions so that people won't perceive it to suck, and what's going to end up happening is they'll get value out of this wonderful platform. And the fundamental step that we begin with is the idea of gathering or developing proper requirements. And some of you may be thinking, well, Dux, this is a technology conference. You're going on management on me. Requirements? Yeah, we got our requirements. 2 web front ends, 1 SQL Server backend, round robin redundancy. That's my requirement. In fact, what surprises me is when I work with organizations, everybody has requirements, but it's pure technology requirements. Now, well, before I kind of show this, let's give them a big round of applause. All right, so audience, tell me, why do you think this happens? Or why do you think in this situation it happened? What are some of the problems or issues here? Why didn't they get the picture correct? And speaking about getting the picture correct, so let me, for the benefit of developers, this is what I showed them. And developers, I told the analysts, since my budget is constrained, they can never use the word star, triangle, and square. Right? So they have to make do what they have. But gang, you see the problem here? Tell me, what are some of the problems? Time. It's 1 minute, 2 minutes. Requirements are sissy. We just do it. Does that sound familiar? What else? Don't have all the information, right? Did I tell the analysts they can't ask me questions? I told them we'll do it, but I never said you can't talk to me. In a lot of instances, when we do these SharePoint projects or SharePoint solutions, we don't develop requirements. We take orders. How do you like your SharePoint? Team site surveys, wikis, want to supersize it? Next. They'll say, sure, why not? And what ends up happening? It's a big file dump. Y'all with me? You feel the love? So, in this session, what I want to point out here is we got to take these things seriously. And when I say seriously, it ain't hard. We've been brainwashed by methodologies, processes, PMPs, PIMPs. Can't deal with that. We're techies. We just do it. Next, finish. No. That doesn't work, especially with SharePoint. So let's dissect how we do it with SharePoint and be good at it. So first, let me define what requirements are. When we talk about requirements, friends, these are something wanted or needed. There's a need for it. We don't just do it because we don't have anything else better to do. Right? It's something formally documented and written, which means it has to be intentional. There should be intent. Just talking, having lunch and say, hey, maybe make our SharePoint site look like Ferrari.com. That'd be cool. Not good. Requirements are capabilities needed to solve a problem. In the enterprise today, what do we do? Here's SharePoint, go find a problem. Conditions of a delivered system, services, product, or process. Which means there are certain rules and logic. Here's your team site. Go at it. Users have other stuff to deal with. And they look at this thing, I'll put a file there. That's all I'm going to do. And it has constraints, meaning it has boundaries on what it can do and cannot do. And that's so true with SharePoint. People think it's like the next best thing to slice bread, but it doesn't do everything. So, what's so special about SharePoint? You see, the problem with SharePoint, I'm not talking as a technology, but the way we approach SharePoint projects, be it an upgrade or a departmental level solution, is we box it from a technical perspective. And we actually start with a technical perspective. Maybe we're going to use a list, maybe a library. How about forms? Yeah, info pack forms. While all that is valid, you don't start with that. The power of SharePoint as a platform is it enables the business. And with that being said, you start with a business. What do you mean, Dux? What are you talking about? So let me give you a quick example, and then I'll show you a process that my organization, we help customers do this, but let me give you an example on how you think about requirements, especially with SharePoint. Whenever we look at requirements, a lot of times people start here. Yeah, we got 2 farms, we got hybrid, we got the cloud, that's cool. But then what if I ask you, what's your SharePoint environment like that?
Oh, it's document repository.
No, but what are the hardware? I mean, how is it set up? Some server?
Oh, it's got an idea.
All right, who has an idea of the infrastructure? Sir, what's your infrastructure? 2 web front end, 1 indexing, SQL Server, else. Why? That's what Microsoft says. All right. Nobody works with it. But why? So always start with that fundamental question, why? If they don't understand you and gives you a dead silence like all of you, change it up. Say 4K. What are you trying to solve? I mean, fine. We don't make Microsoft make lots of money, but what are we solving here? The flip side is you should start, and it's a shift. We technologists, we start with what we're comfortable with, but it's a shift. We start with the business. At a high level, organizationally, what are some of our challenges? Docs, the economy's bad, IT budget has been cut 30%, yet we still have to deliver the same set of services to the business. You start with that. You got me stumped, Docs. How do I tie that to SharePoint? I'll show you. Or at a departmental level, Miss Betty in accounting has to deal with all these Excel files, and I want to help her because she spends 8 hours a month putting all these Excel files together. That's a business problem. Y'all with me? Forgive my southern twang, I come from deep south, Manila, Philippines. Land of Manny. So, you start with the business, and then once you identify the business need, you move on and understand the user's needs. And then after that, we talk about what the technical solution would look like. In this case, SharePoint-related technology. Y'all with me? So I'll show you an example. So here's a use case, okay? And I shared this yesterday, but I see a lot of new faces. But I want you to think this way. So I'm going to share with you a very simple example, and you can extrapolate that in bigger examples. So 2-3 years ago, we had a customer in Georgia. They had SharePoint, a big file dump, and we helped them develop a roadmap. And one of the first things we helped them with is to leverage SharePoint as a project management platform. And why we did that? Because we found out that any given point in time, they have 100 projects that they're running, and all of them are being managed using email, Excel, and file share. Sound familiar? And you know all the pain points around it. So we standardized that, we helped shape the solution, we provided training, all that good stuff. Now, one thing we found that happens in this company, at the end of the month, every project manager has to send, let's call her Miss Betty in accounting, all project expenses. So Miss Betty, at the end of the month, we get 100 Excel sheets of different project expenses, and her job is to put all that together into a single report every month for management to see how much they spent on project. Does that sound familiar? So I talked to Miss Betty. I said, hey, Miss Betty, so how much time do you spend doing this? She said, I've been doing this 5 years. I spend 6 to 8 hours every month total to put this report together. I go, Miss Betty, would you be interested to cut that time in half and save 3-4 hours? Would you be interested in that? She goes, of course, but I don't want to learn anything new. As long as I can do it in Excel, I've been using Excel, I'll be retiring in 2 years, so if I can do it in Excel, I'm fine, but if you're going to tell me to do something else, I'm not for it. Y'all with me? Okay. Fair enough. So, what would this requirement look like? Okay? So if we break it down to the problem around someone in finance have to deal with collecting a bunch of Excel files regularly and consolidate to a single management report, what does this look like? Business requirement. So obviously, in my mind, I'm going to use SharePoint for this because they're using SharePoint for project management. By the way, there's a good book called SharePoint for Project Management. Make sure you get it.
Who's the author?
You're going to contribute 80 cents per copy to my son's college fund? Kidding aside, before I forget. I'm going to show a lot of stuff. This session's being recorded. So if you're interested in all this stuff, the videos, the PowerPoint, the templates, and for being here, I'll give you a code so you can download a free ebook of SharePoint for Project Management. Or pass this around, just put your card, name and address, and just write it down if you don't have a card, and I'll just take it once we're done, okay? If you want to put money, please do. So let's break that problem down, gang. Business requirement. SharePoint shall increase finance department's productivity by 15%. High level. Okay, so 15%. So let's take that one use case. Miss Sally spends 6 hours, or Miss Betty spends 6 hours a month. What's 15% of 6 hours? Hour? All right, hour. Right, that's fine. Very realistic. So we're going to fix that. Now, what's the user requirement? From a user perspective, she doesn't care less for SharePoint. She wants to use Excel. So as a user requirement, user shall be able to retrieve somehow and synchronize project expense information that's sitting in SharePoint on these project sites from Excel without relying on email. So the solution that we're going to do is we're going to cut out email when project managers enter their expenses on their project site. automatically it's going to show up Excel on the desktop of Miss Betty. Y'all follow me? Now we map it to a technical solution. So a solution based on these, Microsoft Excel shall be able to synchronize information with a SharePoint site. Where am I going with this? So now if I ask the SharePoint expert, why did you do that whole Excel thing for Miss Betty? Because that's the only tool she'll use. In case you didn't get the memo, Outlook and Excel is the killer app of every user. Which is fine. Why is that important for Miss Betty to use Excel and get the information from a SharePoint site? Because we're going to increase her productivity and save her 3, 4, or 1 hour every month. Y'all follow me? Okay, docs, this I gotta see. How would you do this? I mean, technically. Well, show me, okay? So here's a sample. So I'm showing 2013. By the way, whatever I'm going to show you can be done with Excel 2003 and SharePoint 2003 above. This feature around Excel synchronization has been there in the last 10 years. Out of the box. So this is a sample project site, right? So the idea now is project managers have all their project information in a SharePoint site, but we're going to step it up. Instead of project managers sending Excel files left and right to Miss Sally, as a benefit to the PM, they're just going to enter it here, and once they enter it here, it's going to automatically appear in Miss Sally's Excel file sitting in her computer on her My Documents folder, okay? So let me create a new one. I'm going to call this item. I'll call this cost. So I was showing this to Miss Sally. I said, okay, let's pre-populate with some data. Table, 200. Chairs, $300, okay? And then what we're going to do, gang, is we're going to highlight this, and I'll just, make it the right format. Currency, okay? All right. And then once we got that going on, I'm going to highlight this information in the Excel sheet, convert it to what's called an Excel table. Once it's converted, this little thing shows up. Publish and allow sync to a SharePoint site. Okay? And then once we get that dialog box, I'm just going to copy the address because I don't want to, type in the URL. I'm going to do this one time. We're going to call this the monthly expense, whatever you want to call it, and just hit publish. So as I build that solution, or as I synchronize Excel and SharePoint, what's going on behind the scenes? Excel is talking to that SharePoint project site, authenticating me, creating a custom list, populating the data, and keeping the connection open. So now, if I open it up, okay, and view it, voila, you see that expense information on the project site. But wait, there's more. So, okay, so now the project manager, yes, I'm using a Mac, get over it. I mean, it's reality, right? We live in the bring your own device, consumerization of IT world. You got Macs, iPad, and that's a cool thing 2015. So now the project manager comes here to their project site where they got everything, their documents, their tasks, their project details, but now they can stick in their expense. In fact, as a project manager, I'm going to put everything I bought. I bought a computer. If you don't realize what I'm doing now is notice that the datasheet view works outside of IE, which is kind of cool. That was one of my big pet peeves. We bought a car, 50 grand, okay? Y'all see that? Now, what about Miss Sally? As soon as the project manager enters this data, alerts are turned on. It alerts Miss Sally. Ding, ding. The expense information was just updated. She opens up her Excel, and within Excel, she can synchronize. And once she synchronized, the same set of information in the project site is now brought back to her Excel sheet sitting on the desktop that she likes. She looks at this, she looks at the invoices and receipt. Hold on, you guys didn't buy a car. You had carpet, retrofitted the office, and you spent $5,000, not $50,000. So she updates it. Her killer app is Excel. the same bit of data, she can push it back now to the SharePoint project site. And once she does that, the project managers would have the same bit of information. Carpet, $5,000. And now, what do we end up with? After I showed her this, she did that for the 99 other projects, connected it to the 99 other project sites, and then she had a 101st summary sheet. You know, in Excel you have a summary sheet, full data. She had pivot tables and charts and reports. All the data now is being pushed directly from a SharePoint site. No more email. 2 months later, I talked to her. She goes, so I go, how's that going? She goes, actually, thank you. I don't have to deal with email, grabbing an attachment from my desktop, putting it together. That works really well. And I timed myself. I saved 3 hours, more than the 15% we were targeting. What are you now doing with the time you saved? Learn how to use Facebook. But quantitatively, kidding aside, what does that mean? I found in this organization that in a lot of instances, Miss Sally, trying to get this report done, she had to spend overtime. What does overtime mean from dollars and cents? Time and a half, company has to pay more. Not only does she doesn't need overtime, she gets home sooner, the company doesn't have to pay overtime. You see all this? By the way, who doesn't know about this? Does not. Okay, couple hands, all right. To us technologists, now if you're thinking, well, that's so simple, but that's the key. Simplicity. We try and go and look for, oh, let's hook up SharePoint to this web service, to SAP, the CRM, right? We always start with the business. So with that use case, and you could extrapolate that to different use cases, how do I develop these docs? How do I develop business requirements, user requirements, and then system or technical requirements? Here are the key steps. I'll go through these key steps, right? It doesn't really matter what you're trying to work on. One thing that you have to realize in any SharePoint project or implementation, large or small, the requirements development process is very iterative. And it's a very short cycle. If you're in a 5-year SharePoint project, something's wrong. Right? Because you want to churn out solutions quickly. So, the first step is to elicit requirements. So what do we mean by elicitation? Elicitation is not only gathering requirements, but it's gathering and understanding, getting some clarity on what the users are thinking about, or what the solution should be about. Here are the steps. When you go through the elicitation process, the first fundamental questions you have to ask yourself is, what do I need to know? Which means, as the implementer, as the specialist, you got to do homework. A lot of times, we as IT, we go into our business, again, we're like order takers. Here's a different combo of SharePoint sites you want. You want a team site, a meeting workspace? No. Every business, while there's fundamental collaboration needs, every business is unique. HR has unique needs. Project managers has unique needs. Finance has unique needs. If all you're going there is trying to solve their file sharing problems, there's no value for it. But with Miss Betty in accounting, if you tell her, I'm going to help you save 4 hours every month, that's a value. So you got to figure out what are some of the low-hanging fruits, what are some of the processes that they're working on that are manual, that you know you can address. Now, where do I get this information? So, for example, just like the project management example I showed earlier, as I was poking about what they do during project management, they said, we send these Excel files to Miss Betty every month. Okay, so I'm going to go to Miss Betty, talk to her, figure out what works and what doesn't work. Get the information, put together what you know, and then do I have enough, right? Do I have enough? Sometimes you don't, so you go back to different sources and pull all this information and make sense of it. You don't just take orders. Is this helpful?
Yes.
It's only helpful to him. Is this helpful?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I need some affirmation here, you know? How lonely it is standing up here by myself. The goal is to build solutions. SharePoint is nice for Ari, but everybody in the company just learned how to ride a bike yesterday. You give them a nice, fancy, expensive car, they'll ooh ah for 10 minutes, and then they'll just leave it in the garage. I don't have time for this. I want to ride my bike to work. I know it's slow, but it gets the work done. Email, Excel, email, Excel, email. Now, there are adventurous few, though, who's going to try this nice machine. Either they don't have a freaking clue. They're going to sit in the driver's seat. You know, these kinds of vehicles, they're stick, right? And call IT. It doesn't, or call AAA or IT. It doesn't work. What doesn't work? What are these Fantastic 40? Those who didn't get Fantastic 40 weren't born yet when they came out. So you elicit, you gather and understand. So you got to do your homework. The next step is to analyze. Once you have all these data, this information, you got to make sense of it. The idea of requirements analysis is to take all the information that you've elicited, make sense of it, just to make sure, listen, very important, that you get the real requirements. Stated requirements, what they told you, might not be the real deal. I'm not saying they're lying. Maybe I am. No. Because they just don't know what they don't know. Y'all with me? It's our job to figure it out, to shape it out. Enough of the excuse, the user don't know what they want. We gave them SharePoint, they said, this is not what they want. The whining days are over. Step up. So how do we analyze? How do I kind of figure this out, right? Here are the 4 steps. Number 1, you got to profile users. You got to think about where they're coming from, their background, their group, which might mean things around, I don't know, organizational things around maybe compliance. Anybody have to deal with compliance? HIPAA, SOX, yeah? Run DMC. Based on that, and one of the key things when I talk about profiling users, kidding aside, I've resigned to the fact, even if we say we're in 2013, everybody has an iPhone 5, you know, you have TiVo at home because you got to record Dancing with the Stars, you have GPS to take you wherever you need to go. The number 1 killer app in the enterprise today is still email. We live in an email world. The second killer app is Excel. The third is Word. End of story. No matter how sophisticated you want to make it sound, your executives having iPad, guess what they're using iPad really for? Email. Fine. Let's make that work. Right? Our approach has always been, here's SharePoint, you got to go to the side, you got to go to library, click here, click there. Forget about it. Make email, Excel, Word, things that are comfortable to them as their front end to SharePoint initially. The hardest part about SharePoint is not the technology, but the idea of change. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Right? Now, based on that profile, the next step is you model what the stated requirements look like. So I'm going to show you an example, gang. One of the key exercise I go through with customers I work with as we help them identify solutions around SharePoint. Doesn't matter. Big, small SharePoint implementation, an upgraded custom solution. We map out process. We use a very sophisticated tool called Paper and Pen and Visio. So in this example, when we work with this customer, they said, Docs, we want SharePoint for project management. Okay? So tell me about your projects. What happens? I mean, humor me. I don't know anything about your business. How does it start? Where does it start? Who starts it? At what conditions that would you say this is a project versus that's not a project? Tell me. So we start mapping it. Oh, there should be a sponsor. You know, are we going to do it or not do it? Once we approve it, a project manager will be assigned. Once a project manager is assigned, the project manager, he or she, should create a schedule. Since we're using Microsoft stuff, the schedule should be Project Pro. And then members should be, y'all see that? You'd be amazed and surprised that a lot of groups and people thinking that they have process, they don't. We're not going to shame them, right? We're going to help them. It doesn't have to be complex. Think about things. Expense reimbursement, onboarding, right? So a lot of little things people deal with every day. You can help. So after you do that, you define the process. It's not gone to waste, because based on this now, by understanding the flow, somewhere here is Miss Betty, I can identify the solution for her. I can come up with the real requirements for Miss Betty. Y'all with me? Here's the other value. Listen, it's very important. Apart from identifying the process, helps you analyze what the true or the real requirements are. What did I just end up with right here? Now, I've ended up with a relevant contextual training plan for a specific role. Oh, so for a project manager, since this is the role and responsibility of a PM, looks like he or she needs to learn this or that, so this will be your training. That's what it's going to look like. Right? Enough of the power user, end user design. While those are important, don't get me wrong, but a typical user couldn't care less if they were a power user or a Superman. Do project management. So, once you've got your process identified, every single thing we do in the business, there's in some shape or form, it's related to some process. The next step now is you have to identify, once you model it, once you put a process, or identify the process, identify if there's a gap, right? Identify if there's a gap. Originally with Miss Betty, when we rolled this process out, we were thinking everything's going to be on a SharePoint site. Miss Betty would go there and do all this stuff. But the gap was a gap. The gap was around culture, around change. She's so entrenched in Excel. The gap is she knows nothing about SharePoint. She couldn't care less about SharePoint. She knows nothing about project management, doesn't care about it, she works in finance. So now we have to go back, tweak the process, fulfill that whole Excel stuff. And then you can identify the real requirements. Okay? That's a process of analysis. Next. This is another example of a process flow diagram. This is for another, a bigger custom solution we did where they wanted a partner event management. It's for HR, training department. And they used to manage their training in a lot of different ways. But they say, we can stick it in SharePoint. Go, let's step back. Let's talk about what you do. When we have a new training, we got to figure out a way to add that training. We said event edition. And then people should be able to request for training, event requests, confirm, once they request, they should get some confirmation and it should be registered. We've got to talk about that. Now, after you do your analysis, right, when do you stop? You can only do so much, right? You can only do so much. How do you know when should I stop asking questions? Because you start with, hey, I want a SharePoint site, then you end up with a big application. But how do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line, right? The process of requirements validation is now to prioritize. Because what ends up happening after you analyze it, while the solution may sound the one, you realize that it's too much. It's always too much. Whatever the user or the business need first says, let's say you're doing a SharePoint upgrade, yeah, we want ECM, records management, Power View, whatever. You're going to tell them up front that's not what you're going to get. You're going to get a shape or form of that scaled down. That's just not what you're going to get. Not in a negative way, but it is what it is. So how do you do this? How do you communicate to the business or the user what the priorities are and how important they are, or which ones aren't as important, okay? So I'm going to show you another example. I developed this spreadsheet. We developed this spreadsheet a while ago. We use it for different purposes, and one of the things we use this for is for requirements development. Is to help us prioritize the needs, okay? So in this example, this is a upgrade for an organization with 8,000 people. We're trying to figure out, we know that SharePoint can do 10,000 things, but we're trying to figure out what are the pressing business needs, which features to roll out first, which things we want to prioritize. Y'all with me? Because that's a common struggle. We're trying to think, what do we put out, what do we not put out, what do we keep? I mean, I had a customer, I was advising them, large organization, Docs, tell me what you think. We're going to roll out wikis, surveys, blogs. I go, oh, why? What? Okay. Well, what are you talking about, Docs? Because my user said they want a wiki. That's like the Enterprise 2.0 social thing. They want a blog. What does that mean to Miss Betty in accounting? She doesn't care for a blog. She doesn't care for a week. Unless she's a DJ. So, what do we do, gang? So we do, in this example, so column A, different departments. You know, the idea is we talk with the different groups. Again, this is a larger implementation. And as they're just, what I do is I spend time with them, okay, operations. What are some of the pain points that you have around your business, the stuff you do day in, day out? Well, Docs, we got this thing called SOP creation. It's very manual. We got to grab that file from the network share, 14 folders deep. Take that file, update the Excel, and then email it to someone, and it's just a mess. So as they're describing, we're documenting which out-of-the-box SharePoint feature that can help them. So I have a drop-down here, so I just pick and choose. Departmental orders, accident report review. So I spend about 30 minutes to an hour with them, and then before I end, I tell them, okay, operations, looks like you have a lot of needs or business needs that we can solve. If there's one thing we can take care of, like right now, what would that be? Oh, accident report reviews. If we can automate that, that would be huge. Okay, what's number 2? What's number 3? Y'all with me? They know their business better than we do. Our job is to facilitate, right? So it's the same with HR department, finance, all that good stuff. Once you have all this data, gang, you flip the view now. You have your departments, right? You list all the features you've extracted based on their business needs. You follow me? Because now it's time to prioritize. So once we look at these features, column C, we have the business priority of that feature. So based on all the needs of HR, list is very important. Lists and libraries will always come up. Third column, if we had to build all these lists for HR, what's the effort? Now, what does that 2 mean? 2 down here means 3-person week. So you got to put some level of standardization, and this varies on your team skill set or who's doing this. Once you put the measurement for the size and effort, what's the business impact? 3. It's a high impact to HR because that means we can automate onboarding. Less people now are going to hang out the hallway if they show up at work the first time. You have those people, new employee, they hang out the hallway because IT forgets to log in. A room wasn't provisioned, a desk wasn't provisioned. I know it happens very often. How reusable is this solution? 1, it's a one-time use. 2, we can templatize it so HR can reuse it. 3, is it reusable by the entire company? And now we have a business value of that feature for HR. This is what we call traceability. Why did you roll out those lists for HR? Because it's going to help them with their onboarding process. Why is it important to help them with their onboarding process? Because we have, on the average, 100 people hanging out the hallway every year. And you know how much that costs? Oh yeah, that's another problem. So once we have the business value, we're not done. We got to look at the other side and figure out how much IT can do and cannot do. We got to be realistic. While this all sounds good, it's going to help the business. Can IT support that? What's the implementation impact? 1, maybe 20 hours, or I don't know, 1 FTE, whatever your standards are. What about the support impact? What about the training impact? What's the total impact? So this is the part where you bring in the business and IT or whoever the implementers are, and now negotiate. HR might go, wow, this is important. I'm going to use that. It's important. It's useful. But IT goes, well, that's a 3. We don't have budget for this fiscal year. And when I say negotiation, it's a part where you ask money from the business. Well, if it's that valuable for you, maybe you can invest in some. Let's hire a temporary contractor. Or maybe, we can send some of your folks to training, get them to do it. Y'all with me? Based on that conversation, now you have a list of priorities. And the color here, gang, that you see is red, blue, green, 1, 2, 3. This was a 3-phase rollout within 18 months for this organization. Because we just what? Validated what the requirements are, prioritized it with the business. That's what I call collaboration. What a concept, isn't it? IT and the business working together. Actually feels good, Lastly, you got to put it on paper. Once you prioritize what you're going to do, the solution you're going to roll out, obviously the technical aspects are already there. You document it. Just like what they say, if it's not on paper, ain't going to happen. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, Doug, I'm just working on a department site. I'm a site manager, right? Are you saying I got to go through all this? I mean, if you step back and think about it, this process can be done in large or small applications. I mean, that whole Excel sheet, you might not do it for a relatively small application, but conceptually, you can apply the method. By the way, was that Excel sheet helpful? Yes. Okay, good. So if you put your stuff in that box, I'll make sure you get a copy, all right? Just don't sell it. You need your requirements formally documented, because what we really, really want to do is not only to have a quantitative description or characteristic of what you're trying to do, but qualitative as well. The more proof you can say, well, we're going to do this because it's going to solve this pain, the better. We don't do that. In our requirements, we're going to build an intranet, a portal with SharePoint, just because. Okay. Right. It should include all your requirement statements, process diagrams, traceability matrix. So gang, let me show you an example. So here's a sample of a requirements. I scrubbed this for it was one of the work I did a long time ago. But for an intranet. I'm not saying you have to use this, but this is a sample where with it's 2008. But all the key information is here, right? So you'll get a copy of this too for you to review, but it has all the characteristics and all the points I talked about that ties in. Now, this looks like a big document, but this was actually a big project. This was for a large organization. So it's very detailed, right? Documented. Now, how do you write your requirements? Some tip. Again, everything I'm showing you, I'm not saying this is the industry standard. It's just the Duck standard. Works for me. I figure it might work for other people. I'm a simple-minded person, right? The more simple, the easier it is, the better. Not only it helps me understand, it helps my users understand. So when I write my requirements, for example, the key is the content should be there. It should be a standard structure, and it should be readable. So when I write requirements, be it a business level requirement, a user requirement, or a technology or system requirement, it follows this format. There should be a subject. A subject shall be able to, whatever capability, within some constraint or criterion. And if I don't put that constraint in, that means it's going to work 100% of the time. Okay? So let's go back to the original example that I have. SharePoint shall increase finance department's productivity by 15%. Subject, increase productivity and capability. Criterion, by 15%. Why is that important? It's measurable. User requirement. User, subject, shall be able to retrieve and synchronize project expense information in SharePoint from Excel capability without relying on email. criterion. Another reason why this is important, because as you do this with the user, once you're done, guess what? I'm going to bring this back and say, hey, let's test this thing out and see if it does every single thing we talked about. It's called UAT. That's another fundamental problem in a lot of our SharePoint projects. We don't do this exercise. Here's your SharePoint, and they go, I don't like how it looks. Because you didn't talk about it. They have an expectation SharePoint should be a beautiful website. Which is fine if that was the intent, if that was the priority. Mismatch expectations because you didn't do your homework. You end up with an ugly picture like what Neil drew. Follow me? Gang, here's what I want you to think about. When you work with your business users, especially in the beginning, don't get too caught up and hung up on how it looks. A lot of times I go into organizations, the way they gather requirements, oh, let's put up a mock-up. Let's use Balsamic. Let's use Photoshop. Let's mock up what it's going to look like. Well, that's perfectly fine if it's a public-facing site. We're talking about SharePoint delivering business value that'll help them do their job better. So if they ask you again, make SharePoint not look like SharePoint, ask them, how about if I make Word not look like Word? How about if I make Outlook not look like Outlook? You missed my cheat. Don't do it. You want to ingrain in their heads that SharePoint is an essential business tool. Just like how you go to work, you use Outlook to get your job done, use Excel to get your job done. Guess what? SharePoint can help you get your job done. Because a pretty website just sitting there like a fancy brochure, not going to get your job done. You agree? Thank you. So, system requirement. Microsoft Excel shall be able to synchronize information with the SharePoint site. Subject, capability, criteria. It's testable. Hopefully, you got a lot of good ideas. And I actually wrote a 50-page white paper about this with pictures and example. I'll send it to you. In fact, I wrote this late last year, early last year. Where's that thing at? So you can kind of digest this better. Yeah, I wrote it in conjunction with Bamboo. But, it's not 50 pages, 19 pages. It's not that bad, okay? So yeah, so you could go through, it pretty much gives you a lot more detail than what I just described. But hopefully, you found this helpful. Was this helpful for everyone?
Yes.
Okay. Requirements are cool, right? Questions? Sir?
So yesterday we talked about building out roadmaps.
Yes, sir.
How does this align with, if we're dealing with certain individual modules, how do we align those, or if there's maybe something in our roadmap that may be against what the requirements are?
Sure. So his question is, so yesterday I did a full-day workshop on how you develop or how you plan, manage, control SharePoint projects. One of the first things I discussed, it's important, if you're committed to SharePoint, you have to have a roadmap, strategically, 12 to 18 months. What would this thing look like? Off of the roadmap, you have what the solutions would be. In at least what I'm describing here, pretty much pertains to that solution level. So it could be at the intranet level or a specific solution. So this is more of the lower level when we look at what we talked about yesterday.
Right, so if the lower level requirements are counter to some of your roadmap or your vision, how do you handle that?
So you have to step back, because in theory, the roadmap should start first.
Right.
So if it's counter, you got to go back to the drawing board and let's review our roadmap. Yeah?
Yeah.
Now, before I forget, my publisher was kind enough to give me a copy that I'm going to draw. And just to let you know, again, I'm still going to send you the free ebook. Tomorrow, I'm going to have a book signing at the O'Reilly booth. I think they have 20 copies or 25 copies. If you don't get this, you're welcome to come by at 12:30, 12:45 for the book signing. But let me draw this and see. Laura Giretti? Garrity? Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
So, good. So with that, I'll take one more question. So I'm getting to that. Sir?
When does your Harlem Shake video come out?
Harlem Shake. Don't know. I don't have a costume. So other than that, thank you for coming, gang. Hopefully it's beneficial. If you want my card or contact info, I'll be up here. But again, enjoy the rest of the conference. All right?